Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my prediction video for tomorrow night's game against the Seattle Seahawks. And there are a few things on the line, both for the team and individuals for this game. With the win, the Eagles can clinch the NFC East. Of course, the Redskins didn't do us the favor of doing that for us on Thursday night, so we'll just have to take care of business on our own, which we can do Sunday night. We can clinch the division with 4 weeks left to play, so pretty early in the season we can get the division wrapped up. Another thing, with another Eagles win, this would actually then set a new franchise record for consecutive wins by an Eagles team ever. The most ever consecutive wins they've ever had has been 9, which we have now tied. So another one would give us 10 straight wins, which the franchise has never done. As it relates to some things that can be set for Carson Wentz, I've been saying the last few weeks now that with the Bears game, throwing two or more touchdown passes in the Bears game, he has now tied the franchise record for consecutive games with 2 or more touchdown passes. So if he has 2 or more touchdown passes against the Seahawks, that would set a new franchise record, and he would have that record all to himself. And then one other note on Carson as it relates to franchise records. He is now within reach of getting in one game what the franchise record is for touchdown passes in a season. He is 4 off the mark. Sonny Jurgensen has the record right now at 32. It's a 56-year-old record. It's from 1961. But Sonny Jurgensen has the record with 32 touchdown passes in one season. So Carson Wentz could set a new franchise record. If he got 4, he would tie Sonny Jurgensen. He's never had 5 touchdown passes in his career in one game, but if he has done 4 a couple times now this season. So if he did that, he would then set a new, he would tie the franchise record for touchdown passes in a season. But what does all this mean for the game? I think it's still, those are all sort of side notes to sort of monitor as this game progresses. The more important thing to really know about this game is that this is the first test the Eagles have really had in a while. They've been playing a stretch of really bad teams, and they've done what you need to do against bad teams, and that's beat them soundly. But in this game, they've got a real test. They've got a real team that's got real possibility of making the playoffs. They've got a great quarterback, and they've got a defense which, despite some injuries, still has been playing pretty decently. Now, I think this game is going to be a lot harder than some Eagles fans think. I think some Eagles fans are like, well, they don't have Richard Sherman. They might not have Cam Chancellor. They don't have Cliff Averill. Their defense is going to be susceptible. We should be able to win this thing without any problems. I don't think that's necessarily the case, and I think that this could really be a problem game if the Eagles overlook it. They've now had 2 full games since Richard Sherman went down with his injury, and over that course, they are 1-1 in those 2 games. And their defense really hasn't missed a beat. If you look at the statistics from those 2 games and compare them to what Seattle's averages are, they're really right on the mark. If anything, they're a little bit better than where their averages are. Now, one of those was against the 49ers. That was the win, and the 49ers stink, so that's a little bit, that's not as big of a deal. But the other one was against the Atlanta Falcons, who are a possible playoff team, and it was at home, so a lot of the same kind of things that the Eagles are going to be facing. And that they were really one dumb coaching decision by Pete Carroll away from winning that game. Pete Carroll made an absolutely stupid decision in that game, going for a field goal, actually trying to fake a field goal right before halftime when he had a sure 3 points, tried to fake a field goal. It didn't work. And as a result, they ended up losing 3 points that they could have had, interestingly enough. Now, I know games play out differently sometimes if they would have scored there, but interestingly enough, the Seahawks ended up losing that game by 3 points. As it relates to the Seahawks defense overall, they're fairly good. They're 8th overall as it relates to yardage. They're 10th in passing, they're 9th in rushing, and they're 9th in scoring. So they're consistent overall in terms of where they're at. They really don't have a weak side to this defense. And they have managed to fill in rather well despite the injuries that they've got. So it'll be really interesting to see how the Eagles decide to attack this defense. That's going to be something that's going to be real interesting to see what they end up doing. I do think that we are going to be able to have to try and pass the ball on them since they don't have Richard Sherman or Cam Chancellor. And they are missing their top defensive end in Cliff Averill. So, they do have some possibilities there that they're not going to have to worry quite as much about the pass rush. But I do think that sometimes these things, when injuries occur, sometimes people really step their game up, but over the long haul, that sometimes just ends up falling apart. So that's hopefully what we start to see in this game for the Seahawks, and we're able to really take advantage of some of the injuries that they've got on the defensive side of the ball, and we're able to move the ball against this team, which I think the Eagles will be able to do. The real concern I have for this game is actually on the other side of the ball, with our defense against their offense. Now, our defense has been playing great this year, but we really have not faced a quarterback quite like Russell Wilson this season. Now, obviously, we played someone similar in Cam Newton earlier in the season, but Cam Newton, I don't think is, frankly, in my opinion, is not as good of a quarterback as Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is a little more elusive, and he's much more willing to try and find the pass downfield when he's scrambling, as opposed to Cam Newton, who I think has a tendency to run first and then look for a pass. So that makes it really hard to play defense against a quarterback like that, because when you're trying to play defense against a quarterback like that, with a guy like Cam Newton, as soon as he starts to run, you can really just sort of key on him and try and stop him. Where with Russell Wilson, you have to stay disciplined, especially if you're in the secondary. If you start to see him run around, you cannot leave your guy. He's going to find him. He made a play the other week against in the game that Richard Sherman got hurt against the Cardinals, where he just, I mean, it was a ridiculous play how he found, I think it was Baldwin, that was just sort of wandering out there in the secondary, who wasn't even supposed to be in a route. And he's sort of running around, and something just sort of throws it up there, and Baldwin's able to come down with it. And so it was a crazy play. But that's the kind of plays that Russell Wilson can make. The reason he's so important is this year he has been an inordinate amount of their offense in terms of both his rushing yards and his passing yards. If you put those two things together and compare it with their offense as a whole, he's 82.5% of their whole offense. So they don't have much else going on other than Russell Wilson either running or throwing. And so it's really about containing him, but that's not that easy when he is such a threat to be able to run with the ball, or if you don't stay disciplined, he will throw the ball on you while he's scrambling around, and then suddenly they're going to break a big play. The other thing about the Seattle offense that's sort of interesting is they have gone through a lot of different iterations of their offensive line. They're on their fifth now this season, and it looks like they've finally settled on one. It looks like they've finally gotten one that works. The last game against San Francisco was their first game this season where they didn't give up any sacks. So that's going to be interesting to see how much of a pressure we can get on them through that offensive line. So that's going to be another interesting thing to watch. The pass rush that we have, our defensive line has been playing great with the rotation that we've been using. So if we're able to get pressure, and I think this is one of those games where Fletcher Cox is going to have a big game coming up the middle, because you've really got to sort of make Russell Wilson uncomfortable up the middle. If you come at him from the edges, there's too many ways he can sort of squirt out. If you're coming right up at him in his face, he's not going to be able to really step up in the pocket to get away from the pressure. He's going to have to try and squirt out. And when we've got guys coming in from the ends, that makes that a little bit harder. So it's going to be important for the guys on the ends to contain on him, but it's also going to be important for the interior guys to get pressure up the middle. Overall, the Seahawks are 8th in overall offense. They're 7th in passing offense, but they're 19th in rushing offense. So they really don't have as much of a running game. And when you consider how well we're playing against the running game, I imagine that they're going to just try and throw the ball on us and really test our secondary. So this will be the first time our secondary probably really gets tested. And like I said, they're going to have to maintain discipline in the secondary, or they will be susceptible for giving up a big play, and Russell Wilson will make you pay on plays like that. All in all, I think this game is probably going to end up being a little more of a shootout. I think there's going to be quite a bit of scoring going on in this game, and I think it's going to be closer than some Eagles fans think. I really think that the Eagles are going to be really challenged in this game, which I think is good for them. They're going on this West Coast road trip now that they really are going to be tested by two teams that could potentially be in the playoffs. One of them certainly will be, because one of them will win the division in the West, and the other one very well could be a wild card team. So over this stretch of these next 2 weeks, I think it's really important. I don't think the Eagles necessarily need to sweep those 2 games, but I do think they need to go 1-1 in those games, and the one they lose, they need to be competitive in it. If they were to, squeak out one win and get blown out in another game, that would really start to question how well this team really is, and if they've just been a sort of a product of their schedule or not. But I think it's really important that they go out there, they play good football in both games, and at least come away with one win in these games, which I think the Eagles can do, and I think the Eagles will do that tomorrow night. I would not be a bit surprised if the Eagles lost this game, but given the injuries that the Seahawks have on their defensive side of the football, I just can't pick against the Eagles in this spot, how well we've been playing. We've been able to rise up to most of the challenges we've had. They've had a ton of quote-unquote trap games that they've had to face, that the Eagles have rose to the challenge in all those instances and blown teams away when they've been in those situations. So this is going to be a test against a real good football team. I think the Eagles do rise up to it, but like I said, I think it's going to be a shootout. My prediction for a score is going to be Eagles 31, Seahawks 27. Let me know in the comments below what you think. What do you think the score is going to be? Do you think that we're going to go ahead and breeze through this game like we have the last several weeks? Do you think it's going to be a tougher game like I do? Or do you even think the Eagles are going to lose this game? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know what you think about this West Coast road trip as a whole, whether or not you think they're going to win this game and lose the Rams game, if you think they're going to win both of them easily, or if you think we're in a setup for a real letdown and we're going to go 0-2 in this stretch. Let me know what you think. Like I said, I'll check in afterwards and we'll see what happens on Sunday night. Until then, fly Eagles fly.